And we're live. I'm Anthony Johnson, founder of 21 Studios, today's host of the Redman Group, episode 41. Our panel today of masculine gremlins includes myself, Anthony Johnson, here in Orlando, Florida, from 21 Studios HQ. I also have Dr. Sean T. Smith, alumni speaker of the 21 Convention, author of The Tactical Guide to Women, Rollo Tomasi, of course, author of The Rational Male, Ryan Stone, the fourth R of the Manosphere, and alumni speaker of the 21 Convention. And today we have a special guest, Bob Lewis, author of The Feminist Lie, who will go by DDJ throughout the show. This is one of the best books I've seen on feminism and derailing or picking apart the bullshit that feminism is today. Gentlemen, thanks for hopping on the show.
Hey.
So let's start off with the, DDJ. He'll be going by throughout the show. Okay. Let's start off with the roundtable. Sean, what do you have going on?
Just a lot of clinical right now. I have started a follow-up to the Tactical Guide to Women, but that's in the very nascent phases, so it's going to be a while on that one. And otherwise, just sort of going through life. But hey, Anthony, I can tell you my intersectional feminist knock-knock joke if you want to hear it.
Oh, absolutely. I'm excited.
Okay, knock.
Who's there?
Intersectional feminist.
Intersectional feminist, too?
That's not funny.
I need more coffee.
It wasn't a great joke. Maybe get the subject kicked off.
There goes our mark right there.
Yep. Rollo, what's new with you? Oh, actually, of course.
That's funny.
Jump into it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, my big thing right now is I've got the third book is out. Yay! It just dropped yesterday on Audible. There's a few things that are going on with that. I have to ask if anybody is going to be purchasing that book. If you don't already have an Audible account and you want to start one of the free subscription that they have going on, please use the link on my website, on my blog right now, because Amazon has decided to really fuck over their authors. And for most self-published authors, it's not really that big a deal because they don't deal with, real volume, but it's almost like as if if you're a more popular author, the more punishment you get from these guys. Because how it used to work before with the bounty program, what the bounty program is like, if you go on Audible and you subscribe for a brand new account, you get a free book, right? And a lot of people go on, they say, hey, I want to get Rollo's new book. So they'll go and they'll start a new account and they'll get my book for free. Well, the way it used to work prior to August, we got $50 for, and by we, I mean myself and Sam, because Sam is my co-creator in there because he's the guy who's the voice. Yep. And so we used to get $50. We used to split that, so it was $25 a piece. It was pretty good. It was a pretty good deal. And then in August, they come out with this cock and bull story about how they're going to up the bounties to $75. And I'm thinking, oh, that's even better. Boy, these guys are very generous. I love Amazon. Until you read the fine print, and the fine print is that the only way you get that $75 that boost in the bounty is if somebody goes through your affiliate link to start their own account. So essentially what they've done is they've pitted all of their authors against the marketing and advertising muscle of Amazon. So I am now in competition with the people who actually produce my audiobooks. So if I'm going to make that bounty anymore, I have to have people use the links that I give them, which is like next to impossible, because what happens is when you go on, if I go on, like, say, Pat Campbell's show and I say, hey, I've got 3 books, they're on Audible, you can pick them up on Amazon. What are you going to do? You're going to go to Amazon, you're going to type in The Rational Male, and it's going to come up, right? Well, if you go and you start a subscription off of that, just by doing that process, they don't give me a bounty. You have to go through my link. I have to be the one to have directed you to it. And it basically cuts everybody out. They might as well have just simply discontinued the. In fact, I would have had more respect for Amazon if they said, "Hey guys, we're going to discontinue the bounty program," instead of jacking us around like this.
It sounds like standard bureaucratic bullshit.
Yeah, and so I mean, for the longest time, and see what happened is like they've got so much content right now, and they've got so many content creators that they can. They know, I mean, what is it? Amazon owns like 86% of the self-publishing market right now. So if you, just like as Roosh is probably finding out, if you publish, they are going to be the ones who are going to be selling your books. Because what do you say? Hey, my book's available on Amazon, right? You can say Barnes and Noble, but really Amazon is the way to go.
Well, even they just banned Roosh, I think, the other day again.
Yeah, they did. And they're doing that because somebody in Amazon is jacking them around. We'll talk about that later on in the show.
Yeah.
But if you are going to start a new subscription for any of my books, but particularly this new one, which is Positive Masculinity, please use the affiliate link that is on my it's on my homepage right now. It's all I've updated. If you click on any of my banners that lead to my Audible accounts, if you want to start a new account, they all go through my affiliate link now. So that's another thing. It's like I spent probably like 2 days, just hunting down all the links for my my Audible books so that I could replace those links with the affiliate link. So if you're going to do that, please use that account. But the good news is that it is out now, and it is once again narrated by Sam Bada, and the one and only. And so again, I'm working the same deal out with him, so he's getting half of the royalties because, as everybody knows, the guy has been. He's always been there for me, and he's always been like my number one greatest fan. He's always been helping me promote.
I'll talk to you guys about this later, but Rolo, I didn't even let you know that we're going to actually ask Sam to work at the convention next year, both of them.
That'd be amazing.
There's a special role we have called the Voice of God, where they need to be on. Someone needs to like manage the mic who's not the actual introducer, the MC, and Sam's going to kill that, I think, in the back of the room.
Oh, I'm sure. Yep. Cool. So anyways, that's what I got going on. I have the new book is out. The only other things that I have going is tomorrow I'll be doing my YouTube channel once again, which is Red Pill 101, where I go over just really kind of the basics. If you're new to the Red Pill when it comes to intersexual dynamics, this is a series I'm doing with Pat Campbell on my own show that is sort of meant to be kind of like remedial for people who are just coming into, being unplugged, or they just, hey, what's this red pill stuff? Or why does he keep talking about hypergamy? Or why does he keep talking about, the soulmate myth or all this stuff? Those are the basic stuff that I'm covering in that. And it's only for an hour. I do take questions from the chats as well, but I usually just go over like basic stuff. And so if that's what you need right now, or if you've got a friend that needs that, that's what I get into. But I'm also going to be doing some interviews and just some stuff that pertain to the rational male on this. And one of those things is I'm going to be interviewing a couple of guys who are quote unquote red pill pastors, like guys who are in the community, but they're in what I call the Christo red pill community. And these are the guys who frequent like Dalrock's channel. And people have always asked me, why don't you have Dalrock on, or why can't you get Dalrock on Redman Group? And the reason is this: is he simply doesn't want to do it. He wants to just stick straight to the spoken word, or the written word, and he doesn't want to even go on anonymously right now. He's just the way he deals with the public is through his blog. And just to let everybody know that I'm deep into the 4th book right now. And so as a result of that, I've got a lot of guys helping me out with this. And as a result of that, I'm going to be doing some interviews with these guys so I can sort of get into the discussion. And I'll probably be taking more notes than I am, doing any of the talking so much. But it's really just to sort of be meeting of the minds kind of thing, like the intellectual marketplace when it comes to the topic of the book, which is the red pill and religion. So I'm going to be doing that. So that's something to look forward to. And that's what I got going this week.
Cool. Let's pass it off to Ryan. What's new with you? Mr. 4th R? Oh, you're still muted almost.
Hit that Control D, man.
Any second. Oh, we can see him.
There we go.
There he is.
There you
Fat
go.
Finger Syndrome to the rescue. How's everybody doing? All right. For those that don't know, I've decided to take it live, do it live. RyanStone.com is on. If you haven't subscribed to the newsletter already, I just finished the 21 convention speech. I've been passing it off to people along with some little notes attached to it. So there's something unique for there that nobody else has seen. Sign up now if you haven't. It's RyanStone.com with an I, Ryan with an I. Once you've signed up, the fuck files are coming up next, where I start swapping notes with the readership. This is kind of the embarrassing stuff from my Dirty Sailor pickup days. Going to be the successes and the failures. I strongly suggest if you haven't listened in, do it now. That includes the 4 female followers that actually put up with what I'm saying. So kudos to all them. And then beyond that, it's just a matter of getting all my content onto one place. And if you haven't seen some of the articles from that I used to write, they've been touched up, cleaned up now that I know how to string a sentence together. So it may be worth going back to visit them. Had a lot of good feedback on the latest one, which is "We are here for the lovable losers." The post from a character named Archwinger. So I'm doing a book of Pook thing about him. He's been gone for a year or 2 now, and I would just hate for all of his wisdom to disappear in the annals of time. So
he was a big EC on the Red Pill, right?
he is. Well, he was. He hasn't been around for almost 2 years now. So I realized if we don't start collecting this stuff and saving it, it's going to be lost forever.
Yeah, I hate that.
Yeah, for a majority of the stuff, we're backing it up on trp.red since the Red Pill on Reddit is still under quarantine. So trp.red, make an account there. You won't be disappointed. And as always, slogging through the married Red Pill where guys are unfucking their lives and fucking their wives.
Good shit. Good shit.
Yeah.
Another thing too, before we pass it off to DDJ, new special guest on the show. Everybody, there are links. So there's going to be even more links in the video description underneath this video on YouTube and anywhere else it plays. So right now you'll see links for the Redman group, Patreon, Reddit. We have a subreddit community going. We have Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. All those links underneath the video right now. In addition, after the show, all the links will be to the speaker's website, Twitter accounts, everything mentioned in the show. And also, yeah, make sure you hop on patreon.com/Redman group, support the show. Once a month, we're going to be doing a special Q&A, 1 or 2 or 3 of the Redman group panelists. And it's a private Q&A that won't be on YouTube publicly. It'll be private for our exclusive Patreon guys at the $10 tier. Let's pass it off to our special guest today, Bob Lewis, going by DDJ throughout the show. Welcome as special guest. And what do you got going on, man?
Hey, thank you guys for having me. I look forward to the conversation. Right now I'm working on my second book. I'm actually working on my audiobook, but it's taken so long, it's become a meme at this point. I've taken a bit of a break from doing the live streaming with TFM. I normally do his Saturday show, which is at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I co-host the 420 show, which is at 8 a.m. on Wednesday mornings, typically. But I've taken a bit of a break from that because I've gotten behind with everything else that I'm doing to work on my next book, which is going to be on the subject of divorce rape, which will be a bit of a commentary on basically the divorce culture that we have in the Western world, as well as a guide for men of how to navigate through that process and come out the other end with your sanity and hopefully with a couple bucks in your pocket. So that's pretty much most of what I've been doing for this part of it, I guess you could say. I did start a YouTube channel about a year ago. I was making 3 videos a week on average. I now, because I've been behind on my books and my writing, I'm now basically focusing on trying to get 1 video out a week. I should have a video out tomorrow. And I've been focusing a little bit more on the political aspects of the Red Pill just because of the way things have been going. I've been seeing kind of an upsurge in the manosphere, and I've seen an upsurge in many Red Pill sub-communities. And I think that this is kind of the way forward at this point, because there's a lot of the people that have a problem with the manosphere. They seem to be working at a very high level to try to shut down voices like Roosh and many people in the MGTOW community, as well as anybody who kind of disagrees with their particular narrative. And so as I've seen those connections, I'm starting to try to address those connections at a higher level, I guess you could say.
Kick ass. Before we get
Well, let me show myself, since everybody else had a chance to shoot. No disrespect. Okay. So yeah, I have a landing page. It's misandrytoday.com. You can check it out. I have a real video channel up now. I've got a BitChute channel. I'm on Gab as well as Minds.com. All those links are at misandrytoday.com. And of course, I'm on YouTube. My channel is misandrytoday.
What do you think? What do you think of Minds.com? Just briefly. I got an invite to it. I'm wondering if I should even bother with it.
People are using it. Mm-hmm. It's not as big as Facebook, but people are using it. But here's the thing about Facebook, right? When you put up a Facebook page, you're only going to get about 6% of your followers are going to see your posts, unless you purchase expanded reach from Facebook. So even though Facebook is a monster platform, less than 10% see your posts. And the reality is that there's better engagement on Minds. So really the engagement level, I haven't seen any reduced engagement. I've actually left Facebook, but the Minds engagement is pretty good. I mean, occasionally you'll get some people that'll go on and they'll just kind of troll Minds a little bit here and there, but there's a lot of good information there.
Oh, cool.
Do you
Yeah, I was doing Medium for a while, and then that just turned into an SJW shit fest. So
Yeah. DDJ, do you prefer Minds over Gab, or do you use both platforms equally?
Gab does things Minds does not, and Minds does things Gab does not. So like for people that want to actually write like blog posts and things like that, Minds is a great option for those types of things. For people who want to upload short videos like 20 minutes or less, Minds is a better option. Gab has a live streaming feature that doesn't work very well, but Gab is a good replacement for Twitter. And a lot of people who've been banned from Twitter have actually switched to Gab.
Yeah.
So Gab is growing. That's why you've seen all the huge mass deplatforming.
Cool. Well, not cool in the deplatforming case, but yeah, got it. I'm on Gab too a little bit. I need to get more on it. I saw Tule get kicked off recently, and they're hosting all that shit, but they're back online. That was awesome.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, and that's something that we can talk about too, because I mean, I'm in the process of making a video about the whole deplatforming piece.
Yeah.
And we can go into that a little bit later.
Cool. So final quick updates here before we actually dig into the meat of the show. Once again, all the links mentioned here throughout the show are going to be in the video description, including to DDJ's YouTube channel, missinjurytoday.com, all the speakers, everything like that. My own personal announcement before we hop on to the show too is that Tactical Soap recently signed on as a sponsor to 21 Studios, our own YouTube channel. And later today on 21 Studios, you're going to see a full announcement for that, everything going on with that. Very happy to have them. They've been sponsoring Richard Cooper and George Bruno for a long time, and very badass stuff. My own Billy Mays pitch, right? Get the super now.
You need to dye your hair a little bit darker so you can get that unnatural beard color.
You need to get a Coke habit.
Maybe a voice mod, a little voice mod. So for today's show, let's hit this too. We've had a lot of super chats come in very early in the show.
Yeah.
Everybody who dumped in a super chat, super appreciated. There was two of them for like $20. A couple more after that. Let me dig through these real quick.
I put them in our chat.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we need it. All right, we have them in the private chat, and we will get to the exact comments. But I much appreciated all of you guys. The 1999 one, $20, $2, $5, $5. You guys are on fire. Much appreciated. So for today's show, though, we have DDJ on as a special guest. We really want to focus in on him and his work, and then compare and contrast it to what we do. Once again, his book is The Feminist Lie. For the time being, you can find it on Amazon before they ban it, right? And it's a great little book. It's not much. It's like $11, $12, something like that. Let's dig into it. DDJ,
Yeah.
What can you tell us about what can you tell not only us, but particularly the viewers who aren't familiar with your work, what they should know about your book before they go and buy it? Because of course they're all going to go buy it right after the show.
There you go. I worked in family law for over 10 years as a paralegal. I not only did more than my fair share of trials, but I also did a fair amount of appellate work, which means cases that went to the Court of Appeals. The majority of the family law work I did were multiple streams of litigation. So in other words, not only was there a divorce involved, but in addition to that, there would be, a police investigation, a child protective services investigation. There were abuse allegations, basically the ugliness of family law. I did this in Washington State for over 10 years. I worked in probably 10 to 12 different counties of the 39 counties that exist in Washington State. And during that process, I also did some MRA work with regard to the Washington State Legislature, and I have conferred with MRAs around the country back in the day. I'm married twice, divorced twice, won custody of my children both times.
Damn.
So that's my background. So when it comes to when I write the book, when you read the book, you need to understand that this isn't just a bitter man who is upset about his own divorce situation, because I won. It's about somebody who works in the front line in the family court, who's seen this up front and has spent a lot of time looking at the legal elements and the legal aspects of it. And the book is basically my with examples of bad things are. And I will say this, as stark as the book is, and as tragic as some of the stories in the book are, things are worse today. in that those that are actually going through the system who were victimized by feminism, they get raked over the coals a lot harder. The good news is that less and less men on a percentage scale are subject to that, because the red pill is waking men up. They're starting to realize that there is something else. We can stand up for ourselves. We can communicate amongst ourselves. We can mentor one another. And I think those things are extremely important. But I think the first step of that process is to say, look, this is how bad it is. Feminism is a lie. Here's how it not only hurts men, but I even had a chapter dedicated to women to show how feminism harms women as well. It's a horrible ideology, and I think that the big piece that people forget is it is not a gender. I don't hate women, I don't blame women, but there are fanatics in the feminist community that want men and women to hate one another, and the feminist lie debunks a lot of that.
Yeah, Ryan, I saw your question. Yeah, DDJ, your audio got a little bit choppy on that, but most of it was pretty clear. It might have been like internet connection.
All right. Yeah, my internet's not great where I'm at. I apologize.
It's cool. So what about when someone comes to read your book and they're like, well, what about first wave feminism? What about, voting rights for women? What about that? Because that's immediately what a lot of people jump to when they hear the word feminism, even though that hasn't been an issue in 100 years in the United States.
Well, let me take that argument from two perspectives. The first perspective is this. In the United States, the last fight for equality was won in 1963 with the Equal Pay Act. There is not a single legal right that men have in the United States that women don't have. And women actually have a plethora of rights and privileges that men actually don't. And we can get into that in a second. However, if you look at my book and you look at, like, say, chapter 2, where I go into the history that feminists don't want you to see, I talk about how there are women who achieved things prior to first wave, prior to second wave feminism. And the reality is that it used to be that rights used to be akin to responsibilities. So if you were a landowner, if you were established in your community, you were financially and emotionally invested in your community, you got rights in return. If you weren't, you didn't. And this was whether you were male or female. Now, was the women's right to vote codified in law? No, but women did vote. And that's what people don't understand.
In some states,
women did vote,
right? It was like
not even. It was based on whether or not the women were landowners, and there were landowners as far back as even the New World in the United States.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, men in general only got the vote, I think it was 15 years prior. So it was really just everybody was getting the vote within that same generational period.
Yeah.
Well, and again, the thing is, again, if you were a landowner, if you were vested in your community, if you contributed to the tax base, you voted. But if you
that's what I mean for non-landowners.
Exactly. And that's the piece that a lot of people forget. So what they want to do is they want to only talk about the women's right to vote in a particular context and try to make it look like women were chattel prior to that, when the reality was completely different.
Well, even beyond that, voting wasn't even designed, as far as I know, as a right in the United States off the bat. It was seen as like a duty and a responsibility to facilitate the function of government. It wasn't viewed as like an individual right like we see it today. Or it's just universally accepted today as that, like that's, obviously, or evident or something like that. I don't know if
and that goes back as far as like the ancient Greek times, where the landowner essentially was the soldier for the country.
Yeah, it was basically like jury duty, as I understand. It was seen almost like jury duty in early America.
I got a quick question here. I've heard feminism put this way, and I kind of agree with it. Maybe you can clarify a little bit, but a lot of people who are knowledgeable, I think, about the history of like the suffragettes and first wave, second wave, third wave feminism are of the opinion, and maybe this is a MGTOW opinion, or maybe this is an MRA opinion, but the idea is that there were no waves of feminism. That has always been the same sort of, female empowerment, female supremacism movement ever since Seneca Falls back in 1848 or something like that. Yeah. And that the only reason that we think of feminism in terms of waves is because we have to qualify what happened before. We have to grant women this idea that, well, you know, what the suffragettes did was good, but what's going on in second or third wave feminism is bad. And so there's this qualification for it. But I think that a lot of people don't understand that even the suffragettes were really a terrorist organization back then. I mean, they were, I can show you, was articles and the news clippings of the time where they were actually plotting assassinations of men. They were bombing churches because the churches were against the suffragettes. There was quite a bit of, you know, what we would call right now radical feminism, but it was just as radical, but in the context of that time. So what I'm curious to know is, do you think that there were waves of feminism, DDJ, or do you think that it was basically one long movement that's just sort of been interrupted by wars and cold wars and social events and things like that?
Well, here's the thing. I always say this on my channel. I always say that liars always lie. I believe that the waves of feminism are just an attempt to rebrand. But if you look at, like, I just recently read the Communist Manifesto. And if you've seen my channel recently, I've done some videos in the last 6 months about Antifa and their tactics. However, when you talk about the history of feminism, like with the suffragettes and the things like that, Antifa is doing the same thing. They're following the same playbook, and the playbook is, for all intents and purposes, is the Communist Manifesto. So when you talk about these different things, you know, feminism will come up. It'll go into fashion for a little while. You know, like first wave did. It went into fashion for a little while, and then it goes away. And when you talk about first wave feminism, for example, their tactics are very similar to what Antifa and what BAM, By Any Means Necessary, is doing. What they will do is they will place a woman on the front line. The woman will instigate the confrontation, and then the second that the people she's opposing respond, a bunch of men jump to her defense and beat that person down. And that's exactly what Antifa is doing as well.
And by a particular woman, you would mean like the Kavanaugh stuff, right? Like throwing her at the front lines, and then all of a sudden everyone swarms around her to defend her.
I think that's part of it, but that's a slightly different issue, which I'm happy to get into. I'm actually thinking like Yvette Falarka. If you look at the Antifa videos, you'll see that with the Antifa videos, when they do their confrontations, there'll be a very small, demure female in the front line, and then she will be surrounded by men. So she will run her mouth. She will wind everybody up. She will make the vitriolic comments. The men will sit in the back. And then the second somebody responds to her, the men will step up, white knight for her, and beat that man down.
Okay. Ryan, you had a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask. So I was thinking the way you were talking about that is like the rebranding. I was thinking back to Lloyd's Coffee House and the birth of the Scottish Enlightenment. I don't know if you're familiar with that stuff there, Dee. But do you notice how there was that it sounded exactly the same, how the girls there were protesting guys drinking coffee and sitting all their time with other guys hanging out in the coffee house there. I'm just wondering how far back have you found this little trend is gone? Or is it, or am I looking at it the wrong way?
Well, I think at some level, I mean, you know, like TFM says, bitch is always bitch. You know, women want attention, right? I mean, they want their guys to spend time with them. They want to be the center of their world. Even women who are not activists, that's just kind of their thing. So, you know, back in the day when men had men's groups, gentlemen's clubs, fraternal organizations, things like that, all those things took attention away from women. So, you know, occasionally you will see these women step up and do things and say, no, we have to have our time and space as well. I'm not Mormon, and I'm not going to kick Mormons under the bus, but a perfect example of this is that in the Mormon church back in the day, there were men's groups, and the men did things separate from women. And they were like, well, you know, I got this vision from God, and God told these men to go do this, this, and that. And then all of a sudden these women got upset, and they're like, well, we got visions from God too, and they told us that you need to bring your ass home. So
damn, funny.
Yeah. So, you know, but I mean, those types of things have existed all throughout history.
DDJ, what do you think about feminism? I mean, most women today in America and Canada and stuff, they don't identify as feminist. But in my opinion, it's very into this panel, it's very obvious that they're influenced heavily by feminism in ways they don't identify, realize, or even really pay attention to. So what do you think about feminism in kind of basic thoughts on feminism permeating the culture beyond the radical feminists? And like, obviously you have a core group that's like really nuts, but then that, you know, distributes out to the other 80% of the population somehow.
I think feminism is a multifaceted organization. So, for example, you have your rad femmes that say the stupidest stuff on earth, and then you have your educated feminists who seem more rational, and they're like, well, Jane is completely wacko, but Monica seems more reasonable. Monica seems more staid in her opinions. Let me give you an example. The senator or the potential senator elect from Arizona, I think her name is Sinema. Or you look at Claire McCaskill, for example, in the recent election. Those two women have tried to brand themselves in the political sphere. They're both feminists. They both try to brand themselves in the political sphere as moderates. But then when you go behind the scenes and you pull the curtain back, you realize they're just as extreme as the rest. And the reality is that ever since second wave feminism actually controls society both on the right and on the left. Mm-hmm. Many of the most damning laws that discriminate against men, that target men, were proposed by feminists, but then they were fraudulently sold to tradcons who assisted in the passage of these laws. And so one of the things that I talk about on my channel, and I kind of talk about as we dive into these things, is the Duluth model, for example. So in the 1980s, in Duluth, Minnesota, 3 feminists got together. They got a bunch of financial backing from international feminism, and they created what's called the Domestic Abuse Intervention Project, DAIP. And they did a test case study in Duluth, and it was a multi-jurisdictional task force. So it included law enforcement, it included the judiciary, it included the court systems, it included like domestic violence, or they called them battered women's shelters back then. And what ended up happening was that they were so successful with this, what they ended up doing is they farmed it out. So it got to a point where 33 states in the United States required their feminist version of the Duluth model to be used by law. And if you didn't use a Duluth model, you used a domestic violence intervention program that is based on the Duluth model. And so we're clear, the Duluth model says that all men are perpetrators, all women are victims. And it has what they refer to as their power and control wheel. Now, the Duluth model is the most widely used domestic violence intervention program in the Western world. The United States military has a use for it. Every law enforcement agency trains it. Every court employee trains it, from the janitor all the way up to the judges. All the prosecutors' offices are trained in it. Every college campus is trained in it. Title IX is based on it. So when you're talking about the subtle indoctrination of our society, every organization you work for, if for those people that have full-time employment, when you look at your sexual harassment policies, those are based on the Duluth model, the power and control wheel that says that all men are perpetrators, all women are victims. Now, the reason why this is important and the reason why it's so damning is because in 1999 or 2001, I forget, I did a video about it recently. Ellen Pence, which was one of the three feminists who actually created the Duluth model, and she was at the top of that organization that did it, she admitted it was all a fraud in a college textbook.
Damn.
She admitted it was all a lie. She said, so let me give you the example. So I think it was Lord Byron that said that the worst type of dishonesty is the half-truth. So when it comes to the way the Duluth model happened, the way it played out, what ended up happening was they interviewed battered women. They interviewed women who legit were beat by their husbands. And the women, the feedback they got was, when he beats me, he gets power. Well, they changed that to, he beats me to get power. Now, that's not just a semantic change. That's an ideological difference. And what's most important, in that chapter that was written by Ellen Pence in that college textbook, she admits that they were aware of it and that they consciously did it. Now, at the same time, what they found when they were doing the Duluth model was that there was gender parity in domestic violence, which means there were just as many men being abused as there were women. But what they did was they said, oh, well, women are made of sugar and spice and everything nice, and these men are clearly lying, or they would shame these men for being assault victims or that type of thing. And it permeated all the way through. So let me give you the other example of why the Duluth model is so destructive in today's day and age. It is the creation of the Domestic Violence Protection Order. And the Domestic Violence Protection Order, it is a civil protection order where you can accuse a man of a crime in a civil court and deny him his right to due process, deny him his right to an attorney, deny him his right to remain silent, deny him his right to confront his accuser, deny him his right to a jury of his peers. And most importantly, it's on an accelerated basis. So you deny him his due process to meaningfully defend himself or to conduct discovery in the legal setting in an effort to deal with this. And again, he's never been charged with a crime. Most of these domestic violence protection orders, they're civil orders in nature. There's no police report, there's no arrest record, there's no conviction. Yet this civil order has the power to deny a man's Second Amendment right to bear arms. And again, it's its own entity, it's its own thing. So you have a system in place, it's called the Domestic Violence Civil Protection Order, which, by the way, has been adopted in every jurisdiction, in every county in the United States, in Canada, in Australia, in Europe, in the UK, and everywhere where feminism has been adopted, where these men are being demonized without any kind of due process at all. And this is based on the Duluth model. Now, the sad part about it is, this has been going on, like I said, since 1980. So what does that mean? Today is 2018. Well, what's happening is that you have college graduates, you have legal professionals, you have academic scholars who they're, in their 40s and 50s, and they've been indoctrinated, they've been mentored by people they respect who are teaching this cancer to them. And they're like, well, Jane Smith she's a well-known author. She's a college professor. Maybe she's a court judge, and she's the one who's teaching me this. So I must listen to her because that's, kind of how the world works. You go to somebody in your profession who has more experience than you, and you get mentored. And so this lie has been perpetrated across the generations, and it has created a multifaceted indoctrination, and it's absolutely frightening.
And now what we're seeing is the first generation where they've been raised on a diet of that from birth to now adulthood, is what you're saying.
Not we.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's take that a step further. I read an article the other day that said that 37% of children who are turning 21 in 2018 were born to unwed mothers. And about half of children in the United States are raised in broken homes. And just as an aside, and I don't really want to jump into this as a tangent, however, 95% of all mass shooters in the United States in homes of divorce. Mm-hmm. The reason that's important, and I go into this in chapter 3 of my book, is that homes that adopt traditional Judeo-Christian American family values, where biological mother is present, biological father is present, and they are raising their children together, those children have better life outcomes all across the board. Mm-hmm. Those places where there's a broken home, where there's children of divorce, or there's children born out of wedlock, those children do far worse. And again, you look at the mass shooters and you can see these things. Mm-hmm. But the other side of it is that you have generations of broken homes where now it's become a pandemic. If this was Ebola or the typhus that's that's in LA or something like that, we would call it a pandemic, and everybody would rush in and deal with this. But the problem is that because it's this feminist ideology that's infected our entire society, there are no easy solutions. So, and you'll see people, there'll be experts like from the CDC, and there'll be experts from just different areas of government and academic scholars who will talk about the problem, but they'll never actually talk about the source of the problem. They never talk about the ideological conditioning that occurs because of the feminist lie that has permeated our culture at all levels.
We just had a commenter, actually, Roger M, say that single mothers are training mass murderers. So that's I mean, Ann Coulter as well. So I'm totally following what you're saying, DDJ. But she also and others have commented that single motherhood in particular is like above and beyond a broken home. It's the single worst predictor for a future life of filled with crime, poverty, behavioral disorders, drug abuse, violence, everything.
Well, and let me also make something abundantly clear as well. This is not just single mother households. These are single parent households. I've been a single parent for almost 10 years, and I can attest personally, I know how hard it is for one parent to raise a child. You know, my youngest now is 18. He'll be 19 next year. And, you know, he's on his own, he's doing his own thing. But during that process, when I was raising those children, I mean, I'm working 10, 12, 15 hours a day sometimes. And then, you know, you still have to have the energy to sleep and to eat and to take a shit. And you have to be there to emotionally and financially support your children. It's an impossible task. So the reason I want to bring that up and the reason it's important is because the counter argument typically is, well, we have to force the nuclear family. We need to return to the nuclear family. The nuclear family is bullshit too, because it's the extended family that matters. If you look at children who talk about the life outcomes as adults, and they talk about, you know, the ones that are well stabilized and they're doing well in life, it's not just their mother and their father who had an influence on them. It's the grandparents, it's the aunts and the uncles, it's the leader at the church group or the leader of the community organization that they're a part of. And those strong communities that practice Judeo-Christian American values, those communities turn out better adults.
This is a really interesting point too, because usually we see a focus on the breakdown of the nuclear family and how it's falling apart, but the breakdown of the extended family is something I've thought about a lot, but I haven't seen anyone talk about openly like that. I like that a lot.
This is coming up in evolutionary psychology right now, where guys like William von Hippel are looking at early structures of human families and the fact that grandparents actually greatly predicted the success of their grandchildren's survival. And the thinking is that part of the reason that like women have menopause is because it takes them into a new phase of life where they are there to help raise the kids that are coming up behind their children. And so that it goes, I think, way beyond Judeo-Christian family structure. It just goes to human structure and what helps children survive.
Yeah.
I got these stats here just to sort of back. I have a list here, but just to sort of back up what DDJ is saying here is, then this is from 2009 through 2012. 63% of suicides nationwide are in individuals from single parent families. 75% of children in chemical dependency hospitals are from single parent families. And of course, they say single parent families, but what they're talking about really is single mothers, because who has the most pull in custody courts? Who do we facilitate to be single parent more, women or men? And I would always say unilaterally, it's women.
Well, Rollo, let me jump in real quick there, just to underscore that. A African-American male is more likely to see justice in a court full of KKK members than a man is to see justice in family court, because it is completely saturated by feminists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. More than half of all youths incarcerated in the U.S. lived in one-parent families as a child. 37% of families led by single mothers nationwide live in poverty. Comparatively, only 6.8% of families with married parents live in poverty, according to data from the 2009 Heritage Foundation. 63% of youth suicides, we already talked about that. 90% of homeless and runaway children are from single-parent households. 85% of children that exhibited behavioral disorders, single-parent families. This is what I wanted to get to. 80% of rapists motivated with displaced anger is part of this as well. So I think that's kind of interesting how we're going to look at, we would like to say, well, what is it? Rapists. I like how they qualify that, with displaced anger, but 80% of rapists, from a single parent family, it's almost as if they're like training the next generation of rapists.
They actually are.
Yeah.
In 1960, the rape rate was, I think it was, and this is before the rise of second wave feminism, was 9 per 1,000. Mm-hmm. But in 1975, the rape rate had risen 400% after feminism took over society to like 48 or 49 per 1,000.
And this is the last one here is 85% of all youths sitting in prison are from single parent households. So I think that's kind of damning. And when we see that, it's funny because I've posted this on Twitter, and then a million feminists come out and say, well, it's not feminism. It's because men aren't in the family. Men are leaving the family, or it's because men are shirking their masculine responsibilities. And I've written about this actually in the third book. I've written about this before, how men are treated as if they are, or I should say fathers are treated as if they are superfluous right up until that child shows criminal behavior. And then suddenly the question is not pointed at the woman or the mother, it's pointed at where's the father? How come the father's not here to discipline this guy? And so suddenly all of that masculine, all those masculine attributes that were quote unquote toxic masculinity, suddenly those are very, very necessary in raising a child so he won't be prone to any of these statistics right here. I think it's interesting that we say that a father is superfluous in one breath, and then as soon as there is a criminal act, then we wonder where the hell is this kid's father.
Ryan, did you want to hop in?
I was going to say you should probably let DDJ go first. He was talking about the grandparents.
Oh yeah,
the perfect example of grandparents having a positive impact on their children, and this represents an indefensible hypocrisy in the leftist movement. You look at Barack Obama and you look at Bill Clinton. Both of their mothers abandoned them. They were both raised in broken homes. They were both abandoned, and both were raised by their grandparents. And as a direct result of being raised by their grandparents, both went on to become presidents of the United States. And in both cases, by the way, their moms abandoned them.
Damn.
And then, I just wanted to add to the second point here. So I hear these stats all the time, and anybody who's been heard anything from MRA or MGTOW, men are suicide this, men lose children that, and they're all very tragic stats. But I'll leave it at this. Those things have been around for 20, 30, 40 years now, and it's very clear on a societal level that nobody cares. The MRA has been trying for 40 years to get things going, and so one thing I do want to... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I disagree, but I'll let you finish.
Yeah, well, I don't mean don't care as in nobody feels bad or wishes it was different. It's that nobody cares enough to change what's going on now, to get out of the rut. And so the question is, and I find a lot of guys get in that habit of just keep rifling off these stats and screaming at the sky how the world is unfair. It's the focus. I mean, you really, as an individual, you can't do much. You can make videos, and like together there may be something coming out of it. I haven't seen it yet. But focusing on what you can do within those situations. So the one thing I do like is DDJ talking about how he's been a single parent and those kind of problems. And I've been that kid in that situation, so I can totally resonate with that. I would say, honestly, I'm looking forward to hearing some of your parenting strategies you've had to do and how you've kept your kids off of a murder spree. I think that kind of stuff is, and it's a little, it's a very pragmatic approach to something that's not going to be changing tomorrow. And that's my thought on it anyway.
Right. And when I say I disagree, I think that you're right in that people at a certain level don't care. But I also think that every time an effective man steps forward and draws attention to these issues, feminists go after him. And they go scorched earth. And I always say this in family court. I always say, if you're falsely accused of abuse in family court, you need to go scorched earth on whoever's accusing you, because if you don't, they won't stop. They will constantly bring it up. It'll be death by 1,000 cuts. So your only response is to go scorched earth. And many attorneys will go, well, we got to go the high road, this and that. And then when you finally get divorce raped $200,000 later, and you get supervised visitation with your children for 1 hour a month, and you haven't done anything and you've never been charged with a crime, you'll understand why it is I'm saying that. Now, when it comes to many men who actually step forward and communicate these issues, the issue is that there are groups of feminists out there on the watch who will, once you say these things, they come after you. And the example that the two examples, the first example is when I first published my book, I was on Facebook. A feminist in a Facebook author group that I was a part of, she had probably 10,000 followers. She actually put up a post requesting her followers put fake reviews on my book on Amazon.
Oh yeah.
I had a bunch of people on Twitter attempting to dox me. So when my book first came out on Amazon, I'm half Latino. So my father was English and Dutch. My mom was a Latina. And when my book got put on Amazon, Amazon's algorithm actually attached me to a tech author.
Damn.
They just said, all these books on computer science and computer technology and networking, and all of a sudden, the Feminist Lie, and there's this old white guy with, a receding hairline and everything. And so they started harassing him. So I had to contact Amazon because I'm like, oh, this poor man. and they just went after him. And you see this all the time. I mean, even when you look at, for example, you look at the Red Pill movie. Those men in the Red Pill movie, they got demonized every time everything gets rebranded. And what people don't understand is even the private feminist industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the United States alone. There are over 4,000 charities that donate to feminism. And there are women who are actually paid, and I say women, I mean feminist women, who are paid full-time salaries for the express purpose to go witch hunting men. That's what this gender diversity degree program is about. That's what gender studies is about. It is about a degree in discrimination being funded top down. Now, when it comes to parenting strategies for men, I think that the biggest issue is treating your child as an individual rather than a piece of property, but understand that you are their parent and their guide and not their friend. The friendship comes later. The parenting structure comes first, because children like to know what to expect. If everything is chaotic all the time and they don't know what to expect, that's when the child acts out. But if the child says, oh, well, if I act out, let's say you have a 14-year-old who has a cell phone. You say, well, if the child acts out, you take their cell phone. Okay, now you don't have a cell phone, or now you don't have certain privileges, or you can't do certain things. There has to be concrete, realistic consequences for these kids, because that's the thing. If you look at traditional pre-feminist households, or even households that practice Judeo-Christian American values, you're basically, one of your goals as a parent is to teach your child about consequences. If you stick your hand on the hot stove, it's hot, it will burn you. Don't do it. First time you're like, yeah, don't do it. Second time you laugh at them because they should have known the first time. Now, that's a little hyperbolic, but you get my point. The idea is that you teach your children about consequences, and you say, okay, think through the consequences of this particular action and armchair quarterback it and see kind of where things go. And that helps your child make better decisions, because the goal at the end of the day, at least for me, my goal, pardon a little noise in the background here, my goal is to make my children better than I was. Give them opportunities that maybe I didn't have or didn't have the opportunity for, and to equip them for life's tragedies. My goal is not to prevent every little thing that could happen. I don't want to be a helicopter parent, but what I want to do is I want to give them the tools so when life's storm comes for them, they can solve them tools for them. They can solve those problems for themselves with the tools I provide, because eventually I'm going to be dead and they're going to have to do it anyway.
Yeah, I've always been that way too. It's like even in my red pill, like in the third book, in Positive Masculinity, I have a whole back. Basically, the first third of that book is dedicated to red pill parenting. It's very much what you're saying there. Is it's better to prepare your kids than to insulate your kids, and to teach them how to snap back from adversity and how to become better versions of themselves, as opposed to trying to protect them from every little thing. And I think that that's probably one of the reasons why we find ourselves in the situation we do, particularly with education today. Now, one of the questions one of the points I was going to make is, and maybe some better stats for this than I do, but the for the public education system right now is just completely inundated and saturated with feminism, with feminist ideology, to the point where we have 77% of all public school teachers from kindergarten through college are female right now. What are your thoughts on that?
If you ask a guy who's over 50 years old and you ask him what educator had the biggest influence on your life, he's going to point to a man, a shop teacher, a coach, a PE teacher, an English teacher, but they will be a man. A woman can't raise a man. A woman can raise another woman, but they can't raise a man, because men think differently. We act differently. We communicate differently. And the rules of engagement for men are different than they are for women from a societal standpoint, even, prior to feminism and even now. So when it comes to that, my concern is that the public school system is irretrievably broken. And the problem that you have with the public school system, the K-12 system, in addition to the post-secondary system, is that we are not educating our children anymore we are indoctrinating our children. And instead of teaching our children how to think, we are teaching our children what to think. And it's interesting that you bring that point up, because in the first marriage, I got the 2 kids, I put them in a public school system, and they progressed so far, but then they were having problems. My second 2 children with the second wife, we homeschooled those children. And that homeschool process allowed us to instill more family values and to create stronger relationships with our children, because we were involved than the public school system did. And it was interesting because when you look back in the prior generations, parents used to be involved in their children's public school education. There were parent nights, there were events. Not only did the children go to school together, but maybe they went to church together, or they were involved in the community. And now you're at the stage where the schools are acting as though they want to separate these kids from the family. They want to separate the children from what is comfortable, from what is known to them, and they are demonizing parents. And you see this in 2-parent households all the time. And so they demonize the parents. They're like, oh no, you got to think for yourself. Here, let me give you a stat that's entertaining. And again, this is no disparagement on this particular community, but let's just talk about this in real terms for a moment, okay? Less than 1% of Americans identify as transsexual. Less than 5,000 Americans have had the gender reassignment surgery. So we're talking about less than 1% of 340 million individuals in the United States. But why is it
insignificant?
Exactly. It's not even scientific error at that point, which is plus or minus 5%. So why is it that every school district at every level, from K-12 all the way up to post-secondary, is teaching and indoctrinating children into trans ideology when this is not a trend? Now, I'm not saying that anybody should disparage these people for their choice, but I'm saying that you are wasting tax dollars on something that really has no relevance to over 99% of all children going through these processes. Why not rather go through and have college degree programs and high school degree programs that prepare children to be contributing adults in the economy, as opposed to just having what's commonly referred to now as grievance studies? The indoctrination, you're absolutely correct. You know, with a lot of the women who are the teachers here, all the options for men are gone. I mean, they've taken away recess, they've taken away shop class, they've taken away all these things to help men achieve. So as men become teenagers, as these men grow older, these young men grow older, they're confused, they're lost, they don't know what to do. And then when they every corner that they turn, there's some ideological indoctrination going on, and it's not healthy. And that brings me to my next minor point. You know, it's interesting because when you talk about, earlier you spoke about rapists coming from broken homes. Do you know what the demographic for female child abusers is? She's a married educator with children.
Damn.
That's the demographic of the female child rapist.
Is that the girls sleeping with their students thing epidemic? I saw a little thing on it before.
Absolutely. I used to, when I first got on Twitter, I used to post every day. I would see a news article and I would hashtag it "Feminist Lies Matter." And I would show that this is a hypocrisy that flies in the face of the Duluth model. And it got to the point where I was seeing so many articles, I just gave up.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens all. I mean, even Van Halen wrote a song about "Hot for Teacher." I mean, you know, this isn't something that feminism has just come out with. But the point is that because we have the Duluth model in place, it's always the man's fault when the woman is the criminal, even though there's gender parity in these things. And none of this stuff is healthy for our kids. In fact, I've known some friends who've slept with their teachers. They can't form relationships now. They've been so psychologically damaged by it, they can't form relationships. And that's a problem, because if you can't have healthy relationships, how are you going to be successful in the workplace? All relationships are built on trust. All relationships are built on, mutual respect. But when you have this situation where, these feminist women are victimizing these men and everybody's ignoring it, it's like, that's one of the most blatant hypocrisies of feminism right there.
Yeah.
I was going to say one of the things that we talk, well, at least I've talked about in the past, is that in today's education system, we are treating boys, because there is, 77%, maybe even more, women involved in the education process, that we tend to treat our boys or raise our boys as if they're defective girls. The reason I say that is because women, when they are teaching, I think you touched on this just a minute ago, when they are teaching, they tend to teach from a female specific perspective. And so that female perspective tends to become the correct one. So like what you were saying before about how women cannot raise men, or they can't raise, or it's at least certainly not as effectively. And we can see that from the statistics that I just rattled off here a minute ago. But what I see is happening, and maybe you can comment on this, is I see that we are systematically educating boys to be defective girls, to want to live up to that feminine correct ideal, or that girl correct ideal. So when women teachers are constantly rewarding and praising girls for their moxie or their empowerment or whatever it is that they're trying to push on girls, they also push that on boys at the same time. And so the boys tend to become more feminized, or they tend to become more, if anything, female correct, meaning that their idea of what is correct is based on what works the best for the feminine. And as a result, we see generation after generation of these, what we call blue pill guys, beta guys, who are living these lives of this constant supplication, or this constant qualification for a female ideal. Do you have any comments about that? Do you see anything similar to that? Uh-huh.
I do, and I think that, we saw it the most in second wave feminism. And what you're talking about is, you're talking about gynocentrism. In other words, where you put the feminine before the man. It used to be that we would protect our women because they were the weaker sex, because that's what, they procreate, they have the babies, they need to be protected while they're having the babies, that kind of thing. But we see it now where, we are effeminizing our men. And it's funny because when you talk to feminist women and you're like, what are you interested in? They're not interested in a male feminist. They're interested in a red pill man. They're interested in a guy that can change a tire, a guy who can swing an axe, a guy who
competency.
Exactly. And so when you look at these men that are there, they're like, well, I am the slave. I am that. Why can't I touch your pussy? Isn't it my turn to touch your pussy now? And it's funny because when the women are done using these men, when these feminist women are done using these blue pilled men, that's who you're seeing. Those are the guys that are getting #MeToo. Those are, you look at Harvey Weinstein. He was a big time feminist. They promoted that, the culture of promiscuity culture is what I like to refer to it as. Everybody traded sex for positions. Everybody was compromising their morals and ethics. And then all of a sudden, oh, well, guess what? Those are going to be the people that we demonize, because those will be the people that are convenient around us. If you look at people in the conservative sphere, you look at, like, for example, Mike Pence, who has the Pence rule, where you just never alone with a woman. That's a smart rule. And by the way, it's also a rule that some churches adopt. If you listen to the churches are like, look, men should never, specifically married men should never be alone with these women, because we want to make sure that, honest people are honest. So you see some of this as age-old wisdom. But I think that the problem that you have with a lot of these blue-pilled men coming up, they suffer from cognitive dissonance. And that's where you get this whole, I don't know if I'm gay. I don't know if I'm straight. I don't know if I'm trans. I don't know if I'm heterosexual, because they do not have a space where they can express their positive masculinity. They don't have a place where they can play baseball. They don't have a place where they can wrestle or fight, and I say fight, I mean, when I grew up, there were a lot of kids who fought each other, but you punch each other, you get angry, you move on with your day and everything else. You get it all out of your system as a kid.
Well, that's why boxing is a sport, man. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, in a football field, or go to a hockey game, right? That's how masculinity used to be handled. So I think that when it comes to these scenarios where these blue-pilled men, they get stuck in this cognitive dissonance, they don't even realize that that's what's happening, because many of these men are raised by women. They go to school. They're indoctrinated by feminists. They have broken homes. Their fathers were demonized all throughout their childhood. So they have a negative view of men in general. So now you have a point where now these guys become blue pill cucks, and they don't even know that they are. We even see now that there are men even up to 30 years old. You see them, they look masculine, they go to the gym, they've got tattoos, and they are as gynocentric as a day is long.
Yeah, Rolla calls those guys like blue pill alphas.
Blue pill alphas.
It wasn't just
I
that
call
too.
them.
Think back to the military.
Yeah, I actually call them purple pill power bottoms.
Yeah,
but yes, same thing.
There you go. Yeah, well, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I got
Go ahead.
I want to jump in here because I see two groups of people, two groups of women. Well, I guess two groups of people who are advancing this agenda. There are the ideologues who are fighting some long forgotten war. I think, DJ, you came up through a legal system, and that was your first exposure to feminism. It sounds like my first exposure to hardcore feminism was through academia. And it just occurred to me fairly early on that when a conflict comes to an end or a war comes to an end, reasonable people go home and they live their lives, but unreasonable people stay and they keep fighting this war. So, for example, I think that the Equal Pay Act of 1963 was a good and useful thing and is something that needed to be changed. But unreasonable people are still fighting as if it's 1962. And these are the people who I think set the tone in the feminist movement, the people who are still fighting this old war that no longer exists. The vast majority of women who really aren't interested in this, they get sucked into what they hear from the hardcore warriors. And I remember, talking on this subject of fighting when I went into seventh grade, went into a new school. It's kind of a rough school. And I had always been a very timid kid before then, but I decided for some reason, I don't know what I was thinking, but I decided I was going to start asserting myself. And I got in a fight with Julian Maldonado. He was a Golden Gloves champ at the school. And why I picked him, I couldn't tell you at the time. I had no words for it, but I just decided that I was going to go after this guy. And he dropped me like a lead balloon. I mean, he 2 punches and I was down. But when we got dragged to the principal's office, I remember this lady, this administrator, asked me a question because after, as Julie and I were sitting there, I looked over and I said, "Good fight." I don't know what I was doing, but I said, "Good fight." And so she looks at me and says, "Oh, do you like to fight?" And I didn't have an answer for that. But what I would have said to her at the time is, "No, I don't like to fight, but we just worked it out. Like, we're square." And for the rest of the year, the rest of my academic career, nobody bothered me again. I had always been bullied before that. I wasn't bullied after that because I had demonstrated something. And Julie and I were fine after that. Like, we weren't buddies, but we would say hi to each other. And I think that the large majority of women who are advancing the feminist agenda just don't understand. They're good intentions, but they don't get it. All they've heard is this one side. And so my question for you, DDJ, is I think that when you see people trying to rise to the power, to the heights of this power structure within academia or within the legal system, what you see is people who have taken on this brilliant strategy of the feminist agenda, which is they don't give an inch on anything. For example, Betsy DeVos is trying to bring a little bit of due process to college campuses, and the ACLU and feminists are protesting due process because they frame it as an attack. And so when you see the hardcore warriors that are having this rippling effect on everybody else who aren't hardcore warriors, what do you think is the answer to those people? Like, how do we keep people from essentially using other people's resources to out-correct each other and out-politically correct each other to rise to the highest levels of the structure? I'll stop asking the question now.
Sure thing. Well, let me provide a little bit of commentary. And again, this is kind of more of a recent understanding for me, in that I'm not as traditionally read as some authors are. So, like, I've been reading recently about communism and about how socialism converts to communism and that type of thing. And one thing that you said that struck me was that they don't give an inch, and that when the war is over, rational people go home. Well, that's the thing. Communists don't want anything other than absolute power. And seriously, you can go to Gutenberg.com and you can download the Communist Manifesto for free. It's about 100 pages. It's not a very long read. And they talk about revolution. They don't want nations. They don't want states. They want power. And they say, don't give an inch. They say, by any means necessary. They actually, if you look at feminism and you look at the way feminism uses its tactics in academia, for example, and you compare it to communism, they go hand in hand. They practically dovetail each other. Now, when it comes to, let me address your specific question. I say, well, first and foremost, I believe, and I'm in the process of creating a two-part video series about what I call the parallel systems of injustice. And Title IX actually started in the 70s. And it started through a lawsuit. And one of the reasons why feminism is so hell-bent on these Supreme Court justice picks is because feminism came to power through lawsuits, through suing people. Well, the way you solve these problems is every time a man gets falsely accused of sexual assault, sexual harassment, or something like that, and he ends up suffering for it in some way, he sues everybody into the Stone Ages. Because the reality is that in the United States, our Constitution specifically says if you are accused of a crime, you have certain civil rights that are there. And the way that everybody's been getting around it is they're going, well, the police aren't involved or the prosecutor is not involved. Well, it doesn't matter. You're still being accused of a crime. I say that anytime some man is accused of domestic violence, sexual assault, rape, or anything like that, you take your Fifth Amendment right and you shut the fuck up. And then when they do their thing and they do whatever they're going to do, it's like that old school biker saying, you do your worst and I'll settle up when we're done. You take them right into federal court and you sue them for due process violations. You sue them for equal protection violations. If you are a Caucasian heterosexual white male, you sue them for racial and gender discrimination. And and we're talking 1983 lawsuits. We're talking 14th Amendment violations and those types of things. But the problem that you have is that, again, even the attorneys, finding an actual civil rights attorney in this day and age is extremely difficult. So that kind of brings me to my whole thing. Yeah, you sue them into the Stone Ages, but I also practice the martial art of don't be there. So I would minimize, and this is part of the reason why, I know we talked before the show. I identify as MGTOW. I do what's called ghost in plain sight. So I do everything in my power that even though I interact with women, even though I communicate with women, even though I sometimes work with women, I don't put myself in a situation where I can have that false accusation happen. And with women, when they challenge me on things, I just play dumb. I use the 48 laws of power and I just play dumb. I'm just like, this is not the misogynist you're looking for. Please move along, with my little Jedi mind trick. And that's really what men have to do. But at the same token, in the other side of the process, men need an outlet. So, they need to be able to exercise and to nourish their mind and nourish their body at the same time. So when it comes to these women that actually accuse you, you sue them into the Stone Ages and you don't stop and you become completely unapologetic about it. And anybody who says anything differently, doesn't matter. Just add their name to the lawsuit and let discovery sort it out. Look at Brett Kavanaugh. He did the exact correct thing. You sue them into the Stone Ages. And when anybody asks you about those particular situations, you look at and again, many of these allegations, they're exactly the same as every other allegation out there. So when people talk to me about, and just so we're on the same page, so there's no confusion, my oldest daughter was sexually assaulted by her stepfather after my ex-wife remarried. Okay? So for people that are saying, oh, well, you're a rape apologist or anything like that. No, I'm not. And let me tell you something. It was the feminist family court who protected him. So when you talk about these allegations and these allegations, there's no evidence, right? So maybe they weren't there, or like in the case from the guy for the UK subway who was accused of sexual assault. This woman said he sexually assaulted her in the train station. They had video footage of it that showed that he didn't have it, but the police concealed it all the way to trial. This guy's life got completely destroyed over this false allegation. Or you look at Brett Kavanaugh, where there's not only no police report, there's no evidence, there's everybody associated with it disavows the accusers, yet this man's wife and children are being threatened as a direct result of it. You go after every one of them.
I got
you're very much DDJ. You're very much a good company. You should definitely come out to the 21 convention.
Yeah, we definitely got to have you as a speaker. I was going to ask one quick question here, and I know you've got one too, Anthony. But what I was going to say is, in the case of, say, like the police withholding that information, and allowing that guy to have his life destroyed in the court of social media. Do you think that they are doing that out of maliciousness, or are they doing it because they know that if they don't do it, they will catch the heat from from gynocentric interests? Like, if they don't do everything they can to make the guy look like a schmuck, then they're going to catch shit from the gynocracy.
All right, so let's talk about, and this goes back to the Duluth model, and to answer your question, I'm going to kind of take a long way around. So anytime there's a case of domestic violence, there's this thing in the prosecutor's office called victim advocates. The original victim advocates, and this is from the feminist's mouth who founded the Duluth model, they conduct their own internal investigation, and their job is to do everything in their power to get the supposed quote unquote victim to prosecute. Now, we have a legal term for this. It's called witness tampering. It's a felony in every jurisdiction in the United States. However, when it comes to alleged victims of domestic violence, we allow it. Once you allow a victim advocate to get close to your abuse victim, you destroy your chain of evidence. And you create conflict of interest, not only ethical conflicts of interest, but you also create, a variety of different types of conflicts of interest, because again, you're contaminating evidence. You have this victim advocate who might be coaching your witness. She might be a feminist fanatic. And on top of that, she's interfering with a legitimate law enforcement investigation, if that makes sense. So when it comes to that whole thing, that man's life is destroyed. Now, in the case where the police concealed the information, I think it's twofold. I think part of it is, number one, feminists will review his police reports, and that man will be demonized as a law enforcement officer. And I've actually interviewed retired law enforcement officials who've said exactly that. They said, look, there was one guy in particular, shout out to Plummer. He's retired law enforcement. He was actually a police officer when Duluth came out. And these guys were getting terminated. They were getting disciplined. They were losing their jobs because they weren't going along with the feminist agenda. And then the other piece of it is that many of these people have been so indoctrinated by the Duluth model, and they truly believe all men are evil and all women are victims, that what ends up happening is that they go on this witch hunt and they think, well, the ends justify the means. Now, if you're one of these men where this happens, where you get falsely accused and the police withhold evidence and you find out later, find yourself a civil rights attorney and sue that law enforcement agency into the Stone Ages, because they have the money to pay for it, because fuck you, that's why. You see, the thing is that men have to be men. We built civilization. We built every piece of civilization. And these people want to falsely demonize men so that they have these news clippings that they can point out and go, oh, look, such and such was accused of this, or such and such was accused of that. It's so bad today, and I go into this in chapter 5 of my book. It is so bad today that the mere allegation of abuse or harassment will destroy a man's life. The only way he gets his life back in any stretch of the imagination is by holding these people accountable. And you got to hold every one of them accountable. The legal system has the tools to do it. And thank God we have a conservative Supreme Court, because you're not going to get any kind of any case you file in a situation like that. You have to be prepared to go to the federal Supreme Court. You're not going to win in trial court because most of those judges are gynocentric, or they're just outright pussy hat wearing feminists. You're not going to get the law enforcement agency behind you, and these men are basically left adrift. So but we're seeing more and more red pill attorneys coming to the forefront, and the trad cons are starting to rally. I mean, the advantage of the Trump presidency is people are now starting to speak about these things, and they're now starting to talk to one another. And it's not just the random guys in the darkest corners of the internet. It is academics. It is legal professionals. It is ethical professionals and professionals from all walks of life, from all demographics. And as long as we continue to have these conversations and we continue to mentor these men, steel sharpens steel. So when I say that, I'm a big fan of the Vlad the Impaler approach to negotiation. You find one of them and you put their fucking head on a pike as a warning to the others. And the thing about Vlad the Impaler is today in Wallachia, he is still considered a hero throughout the ages. You know, I think it was the Persians would come in and repeatedly conquer his territories, and they would throw him in prison. His people would release him from prison. He would go and be in Vlad the Impaler. I mean, that's the reason why they thought he was a vampire, because he was a badass. He didn't put up with shit. And he would push him out. Every time he would push him out. And the people loved him for it because he was willing to protect them. But the takeaway is that you don't necessarily have to, like, you know, get a 50-round magazine and go for everybody. You just gotta make an example. Once you make an example, you can go, look, this is a teachable moment, or you're about to be a teachable moment. Would you like us to sue you into the Stone Ages, or would you like to do your job correctly? Now, what a lot of people aren't going to tell you is this. Once you actually make an example of somebody in one of these jurisdictions where this man is getting witch hunted, whether it's a college, whether it's a court system, or what the situation is, you will actually change the way they do business, because they're going to look at you and they will know who you are by sight, and they will look at you and they will go, yeah, don't fuck with that guy. And this is the reason why we have these particular policies in place now, because we fucked up and we got held accountable for it. You attack their pocketbook with a court case, everybody pays attention.
Money
well,
talk.
DDJ, let me say that I'm satisfied with my answer. What do? You go nuclear. I agree with that, and I think that on an individual level, because most of us just guys living our lives hopefully aren't going to have that opportunity to go nuclear. I think that the way to attack it on a smaller individual level is just to stay the hell away from anybody who espouses a feminist ideology, especially in the romantic setting. Ferret it out as quickly as possible if you hear those buzzwords and if you hear feminist ideology, and say to her very bluntly, your ideology does not fit with my mission. Good luck to you.
Well,
I would agree.
Well,
I would agree.
Guys,
Go
hang on.
ahead,
I gotta make a quick announcement before we get back into regular convo. Everyone watching the live stream, please smash the like button on YouTube. Whether you're watching it live right now or later on the recording, hit the like button. It helps the show, helps the channel, helps the future of the organization, the whole Redman group. So hit the like button. Keep chatting, leaving comments, and we will soon actually get into questions from the audience after some more discussion here, including through text message. I got a few from you guys on the phone, and then also in the live chat, regular chat, super chats, and all that. And with that said, hit the like button and visit us on patreon.com/Redman Group to support the show. With that said, let's dive back into the show, back from the commercial break to pitch all of our stuff. DDJ?
Yeah, I actually, so I troll a lot of women when I go to date them. And I have what I like to refer to is the 5 rules of dating. Never date a woman who's a single mom. Never date a woman with a criminal record. Never date a woman with a drug history. Never date a woman who is living on somebody else's dime. And most importantly, never date a woman with a mental health history.
That's a tall order.
Right.
That's a lot of women. But
that keeps you safe. You do those things that keeps you safe. And then once you find that woman that satisfies your particular thing, ask her. Say, look, I'm really interested in you, and I think that's great. And I'm sure a lot of guys are just, interested in going after you for your body. And I totally get it. You're an attractive woman. But let me ask you this. Other than your body and your sexuality, what else do you bring to the table?
Right.
Yeah, this is old school mystery method, actually. You could do that on the fly.
Yeah. What are you beyond a series of holes?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, because the reality is that even if the sex is great, a year into it, you're only having sex an hour a day. So, what are you going to do with the other 23 hours? Mm-hmm. And if she's not an asset, she is an expense, and there is no in between.
Yeah, I get it that quite a bit. It was like it's the value added question. I think that we are so focused on empowering women and at the expense of anything that might be related to men that we tend to turn women into sexual commodities, or they turn themselves into sexual commodities. So the only thing that they are good for is for sex, and men naturally want to objectify them sexually anyways. And that's just simply part of our evolution. But the fact is that women are expressly taught never to do anything for the express pleasure of a man. That's why you get this, I didn't dress up like this for you, or I didn't put on these panties. So, that's not consent, or that kind of stuff. So they're taught from a very early age that they are never to do anything for the pleasure of a man. And so when they get to a point in their life where all men see them as nothing but a sexual commodity, and they wonder why that is, and they get upset with that, well, they don't understand the idea of value added, because back in older generations, there was this concept that a woman had to be a good mother, had to be a good cook, had to have some other value beyond just her vagina that guys would be interested in. And I think guys still kind of, especially if men are vetting for a long-term relationship, they look at this and they go, what else is there beside her sexuality? And I get guys like this all the time, but and people think that they're being extreme when they say, what good is a woman beyond the sex? And then women get all upset about that, but they can't answer that question themselves, because they're never supposed to do anything for the pleasure of a man. I got one. Anthony, did you have some other question that you wanted to ask? I think you got one from the thing, and then I got one after you.
Yep. Yeah, we got a nice text question here from a fan. He texted it in live. No name. He said, is feminism our problem, or are bar members, lawyers, and judges the problem? Is a man truly red-pilled if he's playing within the state's rule book? Is there a way to resist governmental involvement in our romantic relationships? Appealing to pragmatics is a coward's logical fallacy.
Let's address the last question first, and I may have you repeat the first ones again.
Okay.
There is no way to prevent the state's involvement in a personal relationship, because not only is marriage no longer primarily religious, it is secular, and the courts have weighed in, and they consider it a public interest issue, and so the government is always involved. As far as like
DDJ, if I can interject, I have a personal history with this that's too long to explain in full, but I did devise something a couple years ago that I found out later other people have already done, called a private marriage, where you specifically go through, you have to avoid common law marriage, first of all. Second of all, you go through the motions of a wedding and a marriage and all that, everything along with it, ceremony, family, everybody, everything like that, even up to and including a last name change. But you specifically and purposefully and publicly avoid ever getting a marriage certificate. That obviously doesn't involve children, so anything to do with family law is still going to hit you in the face. But I managed to avoid a even worse nightmare by avoiding legal marriage in the first place. And as far as I know, it's illegal to do this to the extent you're not fraudulently presenting that you're legally married.
Well, and I can see that potentially being a contract law issue, and that's probably the smarter way forward. But let me tell you how smart women get around that. He abused me.
Yeah.
Now she walks into court with a civil domestic violence restraining order, and she uses that order to divorce rape you, because she can use it to give her 100% access to your house. She can use it to give it to 100% access to your bank account. She can use it to kick you out of your house and make you homeless, and she can take your car from you. And she can all do this by civil court order. So there's a video I did. It's called "Avoiding Marriage is Not Enough." And so when it comes to those situations, you have to be very, very careful in your interactions with a woman. The other thing that she can do is she can take that contract and she can show up into a state. She could just like ghost on you, show up into a state that does allow common law marriage, and she can use that marriage to divorce rape you in that context as well. And then finally, I would say, I forget what state it was, but it was not a common law marriage state, but there was an appellate decision that I read where it's referred to as a meretricious relationship.
Huh.
And so they actually they applied divorce law to that relationship, even though it wasn't considered a common law marriage. But common law marriage is so bad. Like in the United States, we actually have some common law marriage protections, but in other countries, they don't. Like in Australia, for example, you don't even have to live with the woman full time to be considered common law married. She could leave her toothbrush in your bathroom and just come over and sleep over every so often. And I think it's after 6 months to 2 years, even if you don't have kids, you're considered common law married. And there it is.
In America, to my knowledge, I think less than 10 states still recognize new common law marriages. All of them are recognized from any state, but it's not that many. I know in Canada, though, that I think the whole fucking country does it. Ryan?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've extended it from 6 months to 2 years, and Quebec has their thing where they don't recognize it, but for the most part.
Damn. Yeah, that's a whole. I mean, by the way, DDJ, we've had several commenters and fans of the show asking for you to speak at a 21 convention event in the future. That would obviously be a huge deal with your face being on camera and photos and stuff. But there's a lot of guys who are excited to see you speak if you ever want to do that in the future.
Maybe I can do something like the Unknown Comic where I just put
I
a
was going
bag
to
over
say,
my head.
we can find ways to keep you anonymous.
We'll put you by Carl.
Dude,
You and Carl can sit together.
You and Carl can do a Q&A panel with a Guy Fawkes mask on or something like that. I'm down.
There you go.
Fuck yeah.
Hey, DDJ, I got a quick question for you here. It's like when we're talking, and this is kind of something I get from MGTOWs quite a bit, is like they simply say, just don't bother. Don't bother trying to get married. Don't bother with the nuclear family. Don't bother with all of these things. We just ran down this list of all of the deleterious effects of single parenthood, single mommyhood. But what's the solution to that? I mean, are you of the mindset that men and women should just simply go to their corners and not try to, come together and work something out? Because most MGTOWs, from what I get, simply just eschew that whole thing. They don't want to have anything to do with women, whether that's a personal reason or whatever. They're not wrong when it comes to the risks that are involved when you get into common law marriages, when you get into an actual marriage, or you get into what Anthony was saying there just a minute ago. Are you of the opinion that it's impossible in this day and age for a monogamous relationship, for a man and a woman to come together, have a kid, and create, say, a new form of nuclear family? Because right now I'm talking, there's a lot of guys, even within our group, within the Red Pill community, there's guys who are advocating for this return to traditional conservative kind of values, or like, traditional conservative manhood, like here's we're going to do it the old way. We're going to go back to the old school of what is alpha and what is beta. And we're going to do that because women will respect that, and they'll respect men's authority if we do that. But the fact of the matter remains is that this system is so fucked right now that women still retain authority, even though men believe that they have some kind of authority.
But Norman Rockwell said it was good in the painting.
Yeah.
Right. Well, so here's the problem. The problem is not men, and the problem is not women. And when it comes to MGTOW philosophy, I am a reluctant MGTOW. But I will say this. A lot of guys are like, well, maybe if you just find the right woman, or maybe if you do this or that or then some, and you look at the stars on the right day and time, that these things will work. My second wife was the secretary of the county Young Republican Party and was very conservative when I met her. Today, she's a card-carrying feminist.
Wow.
17, and I was with her. I wasted 21 years of my life with her, and 17 of those were married. I gave her 5 years before I got married, and I did everything I could to be the traditional family. It didn't work out. And again, it was primarily because of feminist indoctrination. The challenge that men have, and frankly, I've seen a lot of people talk about, well, we need to evolve marriage. We need to do that. That's all bullshit. I think that yeah, for the family to work, there has to be a return to traditional Judeo-Christian American family values. Here's the problem. Feminism in the United States alone is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and they have paid witch hunters going around to witch hunt traditional conservative families. And they are, this is a full spectrum warfare. And then on top of that, feminism has successfully redefined words. So now if a woman has lied to you, or she's been financially irresponsible, and you say something to her about it, that's considered abuse. And in places where they have, I forget the actual name, it slips my mind right now because I'm sick. It's called, oh, there it is. It's coercive control. For the states and the countries that have coercive control domestic violence laws, she can actually have you jailed. In the UK, you can actually go to jail for not giving her money, or for locking her out of the bank account, or for limiting, funds. Let's say you win the lottery and you meet some chick in Australia, or you meet her in Canada, or you meet her in the UK. And then she's like, hey, I want $500,000 to buy this house for my mom. And you're like, no, oh, that's coercive control. Now you're accused of domestic violence. So
hey,
you
DJ,
have to.
I got a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Since I'm only partway through your book and it's just yes or no question, because I know there's other questions waiting, do you talk about the paid headhunter aspect of gender studies?
No, I do not. And that's a subject for a follow-up book. But to get back to Rollo's question, I think that the problem is that the system incentivizes women to destroy their relationships. And on top of that, it has redefined just disagreement. Any kind of disagreement is now considered abuse. And you see it all across the board. And we'll use the Brett Kavanaugh example. You know, Brett Kavanaugh is a conservative, and they're like, oh, well, his words are violence. No, violence is violence. Let me tell you something. You know, I'm a trained martial artist. You give me 30 seconds with you, I'll show you what violence really is. 30 seconds is a long time to get your ass kicked for by any stretch of the imagination. Okay, so you have to understand, but that's how they've done it. They've created this culture that I think it's Sean said that you know, they don't give an inch. And so what they do is they create this culture, they redefine the words, they don't give an inch. And now you have an entire multiple generations of people who believe that mere disagreement is now abuse. And they're like, oh, he quote unquote emotionally abused me. Well, no, he criticized you for something that you were doing wrong. You criticize him for things he does wrong. And the two of you hopefully fail a different way next time to make that relationship work. But the problem is that this feminist indoctrination has told women, walk away. You can always do better. Look down the corner. You know, if women
settle.
Yeah. And my opinion is this: if modern women treated their husbands the way they treat their parents and the way they treat their children, you would see divorce fall to the floor. Because when the people treat their parents and their children like family, they don't treat their husbands like family. Most divorces are filed by women, again, because they're being told to trade up. Now, I want to make sure that something else is abundantly clear. I'm not saying that domestic violence doesn't exist. I'm not saying that abuse doesn't exist. I'm not saying that some words don't rise to the level of emotional abuse, but the amount that actually do is so much less than what's being advertised. So when it comes to how do we address this for myself, I've chosen to walk away. I've chosen to not put myself in a situation where I can be a part of a meretricious relationship or a marriage. Number one, because I tried twice and failed, because I had to fail the second time because one wasn't enough apparently. But the other piece of it is that the system creates this level of drama that's an issue. So for myself, I try to educate other men and say, look, you know, if you want to go back to this traditional Judeo-Christian American family values, marriage and family, you have to repeal the laws. You have to do it. Because without repealing the laws, without changing the way the laws are set up, there is no benefit for marriage in 2018 or 2019 for a man. And that is the harsh reality.
And there's a huge liability to doing it. And in addition to a total lack of benefits, it's a massive risk. You get all the liability for it.
I also think that changing the laws is not something that the MRAs can do. I think it just has to be an economic incentive that men provide to women on an individual basis. Walk away from the ones that don't act right.
Idea.
I also want to co-sign what DDJ was saying, that nothing is going to stop what they're doing other than not giving an inch as well. The exact same thing they do. Nothing's going to stop it. You have to match it or one up it above and beyond that.
Well, not only that, but rewarding the women who don't buy into it with our presence and our devotion.
That too.
Yeah, question for you then, Didi. To expand on what Sean's question was, where you were talking about Operation Scorched Earth. So, and it's going to tie into my little personal story. I'm like Anthony here. It's a little too much to say right now. I'm going to give a shout out to Terrence Popp for his video on administrative violence. I essentially did have that through the military there. So I've noticed this, and I've done at least a dozen or so summary trials with some of my students and other people, and they tend to just say the same thing. They want it to all go away, and they roll over and play dead. So I find it's a horrible, and I think you're familiar with the term learned helplessness, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I find that tends to be, and maybe it's a recent thing, or maybe it's always been that way. That's like the default male experience when it comes to this kind of hardship, to where you would want to do an Operation Scorched Earth. And I don't know how to deal with this level of risk aversion that seems to be happening now. I was curious about your thoughts. I mean, normally I just suggest up your testosterone because that builds your disagreeableness, but that's all I got.
Well, so I have a martial arts background. I use and Century is not paying me for this, but I use a Century Wave Master bag, and it's a water bag. You can fill it up, and you can beat the shit out of it. And I suggest you wear gloves. Make sure something you've got a wrist brace so you don't hurt yourself. Hashtag disclaimer. But men need to have an outlet for for the stress that they overcome. Men are physical in nature. And yeah, I mean, for those guys that are risk adverse, of course you want to be risk adverse. The problem that I see, and I think this is something I mentioned prior to the show starting, the problem that I have with certain minority groups within the MGTOW community is that they don't just want to walk away from women, they want to burn their shit for warmth. The reality is you can live your life. You can go and achieve things. You can participate in your communities. You can do all these other things. Just avoid the threats. And part of avoiding the threat is not necessarily going and hiding in the woods and burning your shit for warmth. It's about true camouflage where you can hide in plain sight.
Well, yeah, but we were talking about you going nuclear. At that point, that breaches.
At that point, you
have to.
Well, and let me talk about that a little bit. Let's kind of dive into a little bit more. The reason I say go nuclear is this. If you get falsely accused of domestic violence, for example, your gun rights can go away. Now you can no longer hold a gun. If you get falsely accused of domestic violence, that limits your employment options. We live in an information age society. If there is a domestic violence court order, whether it's criminal or civil, on your public record, that limits your ability to get an apartment, that limits your ability to buy a house, that limits your ability to get a job, that creates social implications for you. It affects your entire life for the rest of your life. So if your life is going to be destroyed anyway, which it will be, it's better to make an example out of the person who is attempting to do so. And frankly, there are ways that you can do it where you call attention to the issues and not necessarily have to break the bank to do it. It's about exerting your civil rights. I mean, the nice thing about the United States that Canada doesn't have, or some of these other countries don't have, we have a constitution. We made
ours in '86.
Yeah, but you also got Justin Trudeau. I mean, come on. So, and don't get me wrong, I think it's great that you have a trans president. I think that's awesome. But, it is what it is.
Son of Castro.
Stunning and brave. Right. Yeah. So my point, though, is that in the United States, you need to stand on your due process rights. And those other countries that have due process rights, as a man, you need to learn what they are. You need to know if you have a right to remain silent. You need to know if you have a right to confront your accuser. And if this woman is not filing a police report, you need to scream about it, because at least in the United States, if a woman files a false police report, that's a felony. She can go to jail for that. That's why they're not doing it.
I have a quick anecdote, actually. I was falsely accused of domestic violence in 2010 by a young woman. And she ended up going to jail. She made the call. She made the lie. She did all these things. I heard all of it go down. And the first thing I did was call 911. I called 911, told them exactly what had happened, and that she was lying viciously. Every single thing out of her mouth was a complete lie. And then I wanted them to send additional officers immediately, because I did not feel safe being a man that I was going to go to jail for complete bullshit that did not exist and factually did not happen. And sure enough, I was very, very worried I wasn't going to go to jail even in spite of that call. But I think that call, that I knew that was being recorded, so I wanted it on record, I think that's part of what saved me that night. And she actually went to jail that night. And I ended up getting letters in the mail and shit that I was a victim of domestic violence, all that stuff. But it was a very close call. It took a good half hour of staying very quiet, being very, very careful with my words, basically, remaining silent except where I needed to make it very clear what had happened. And in the end, the officers had to make a decision, and they chose right. And the second they did, she started screaming, spitting, kicking. They threw her in the back of the police car and started kicking. She tried to kick the windows out. It was nuts. That's the whole story itself. But I made it out alive of that, and I knew even at the time in 2010 how close that was, due to the men's rights community and things like that I was familiar with in the pickup community. Guys that had gotten burned by stuff like that.
Right. I got a question that's related to that. This is a horrible story. I have DDJ. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I have two clients right now, two men who are both dealing with being falsely accused. Neither of the accusers have gone to the law. And so these guys are trying to fly under the radar, understandably, like they're just trying to keep as low profile as possible and not draw any attention to this accusation that's circulating in the community, but not in the legal community. So what would your advice be to these guys?
I think that I would document every time it came up. And if these are people that have any kind of means, I might consider a civil lawsuit for slander or libel, especially if it impacts them in some way, like say if they're self-employed or if there's other issues like that. You know, I have an anecdotal story as well. There was a client who shall remain nameless who was falsely accused of domestic violence. This person was in one branch of unnamed special forces, and the woman, and he was a medical professional. The woman accused him of domestic violence, and his license was on the line. They came to his house. They took all his weapons. And it was the night before the hearing. I actually came into the case on Saturday. I was called in, and I went out to interview him on Sunday for a Monday hearing. And as I'm interviewing him, he's wanting to fly under the radar. He's very insecure about the whole thing. He doesn't want to talk about it.
He just wants it all to go away.
He just wants it all to go away, as every other man does. But he's facing a criminal investigation. He's facing a domestic violence allegation. And he's facing losing his medical license. So I'm interviewing him, and finally I realize he's holding back. And again, he's shamed. He's completely shamed. And this is a person who is a decorated war veteran, who, when you look at him, you would never know, based on his body language and everything, that he had the combat experience, the knowledge, and the abilities that he had. Finally, he told me, he said, well, I can exonerate myself now, but if I do, it'll destroy my reputation. And I said, well, how can you exonerate yourself? Well, it turns out he met this woman in a BDSM club, and he's a bottom. And so he recorded every one of their sexual interactions, and specifically, he liked to be tied up. So every one of these videos, he showed them to me. He had them on a video camera. Every one of these videos, you see her turn on the video. She walks over, ties him up, and she's the aggressor every time. And this man had a huge box of these videos. Everyone was the same. He gets tied up. She's the aggressor, yet she's accusing him of rape. So I start laughing. I'm like, this is awesome. And so I call the attorney, and I'm like, dude, we're going to crucify this woman. We're going to crucify. We are going to fuck her so hard, it's not even going to be fun. Like, her kids are going to feel it, right? So we get to the courthouse with the tapes, and the attorney is watching through a camcorder. And he's got it on mute, and we're just sitting there at 9 a.m. in the morning, and all these people are walking by, and he's basically watching porn.
Porn.
Yeah, really. So, well, one of the things you can do in a domestic violence situation, you have something that's going on like that, you can do what's called exclude the witness and seal the courtroom. So this man was somebody who was somebody in the community. He was, prominent in the community. He was very well known. We sealed the courtroom, and we excluded all the witnesses. They had no idea we were bringing this up. It was trial. They had no idea. So we get in there, and the attorney just starts trolling the judge. Your Honor, I've got evidence right here. I don't want to see it. It was hilarious. Finally, it got admitted into evidence. She lost her shit so bad that under oath, she just started ranting about how much she hated him. And again, the mask was completely off.
Oh yeah.
By the end of the hearing, but once the hearing was done, he was completely exonerated. He got his license back. The police gave him his guns back. She got charged with filing a false police report. She got charged with extortion. She got charged with perjury, the entire thing. And he was completely exonerated. Now, when you're trying to fly under the radar, there's two aspects of it. There's the emotionally relevant facts, and there's the legally relevant facts. Now, because there's no legal issue here at hand, even though there's potentially one, these clients should never ever talk about this issue other than just to deny it. And typically, when it comes to a lot of these false accusers, there is a history of it. And without going over too much time, there's another important story to tell as well. Had a friend of mine who was with a woman. They had a child together. She accused him of DV. She had a kid. She pulled the pin on the fat grenade. He quit having sex with her, and he started cheating on her. So she got upset, falsely accused him of DV. He kicked her out after she lost her shit, said, get out, you're done. She accused him of DV. We did a background check on her and found out that not only did she accuse him, not only was this not a first time for her, every serious relationship she'd had in the last 4 years, she had filed a domestic violence restraining order against her ex. And in one case, her ex-husband filed a DV restraining order against her because, wait for it, she assaulted him because he cheated on her because she was a bitch.
So how relevant is that history in court?
It's all relevant. If they have a history of filing false DV claims or falsely accuse somebody, that's character evidence. That's any attorney who knows anything about the rules of evidence can use that to effectively attack a false accuser. Well, so you know what these guys should be doing is they should have a file of notes on these two women so that if it ever does come up, they're ready to go.
What is the ability of the standard beta, say a beta blue pill gynocentric judge, to ignore that stuff though?
Well, this is one of those scenarios where I always tell people, when you walk into court, you never expect your resolution to happen from the trial court judge. You always need to prepare for your appeal on day one. Now, there are gynocentric people in the Court of Appeals, but the nice thing about the Court of Appeals is they focus on the legal facts, they focus on the legal arguments rather than the personalities of the individual. So they're less likely to be swayed by that feminist indoctrination when you present verifiable facts.
Cool. Rollo, did you want to hit a questionnaire for him?
Yeah, let me unmute here. I'll kick myself if I don't ask you this. Obviously today we're dealing with the Brett Kavanaugh situation and Me Too. How do you think Me Too has sort of upped the stakes as far as the feminist lie and the feminist the way things are going right now? I think from my perspective, it seems like Me Too has been weaponized in a way that it was designed to be weaponized, and so limiting no statute of limitations being one of them. Also denying a man right to habeas corpus. You can't confront your judge or whatever. You can't confront your accuser. And then it seems to me that Me Too is it also has effects when it comes to consent. And I also see a lot of talk about enthusiastic consent now in the age of Me Too. And what I mean by that is, like, you have to be alpha fucks to actually have real true consent with a woman these days, because women today, I've seen article after article of this written about how there's this quote unquote gray area sex where these women have like duty sex now. So it's like, it's sex that they didn't want to have, but they had anyways, because either A, they felt threatened, or B, it was like impolite for them to say no, or the guy had some sort of pre-expectation that he was gonna get laid, but she wasn't really enthusiastic about it. And so now the litmus test for consent has gone from no means no to yes means yes, and itemizing every single thing, to I wasn't that into it. And this is just my opinion. I really see Me Too and enthusiastic consent kind of being used together to really fuck guys in divorce settlements right now. Because what I'm seeing is, like, if a woman ever had duty sex with her husband, if she ever had sex that she didn't want to have but still did anyways, or was transactional sex, I make a difference between validational sex and transactional sex. Validational being the enthusiastic, alpha fuck side of things, whereas the transactional, of course, is the beta bucks. I get some resource transfer out of having sex with this guy. But now the litmus test for what actually constitutes rape is, she has to be really vocally into it all the time, and it has to be enthusiastic. And maybe you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I can see that in issues of marital rape, I can see the enthusiastic consent and Me Too sort of tag teaming to ensure that any guy that goes into that courtroom is going to come out a loser.
Well, I think that the first thing a guy could and probably should do in a situation like that is, the second that they try to reframe anything as sex or rape or sexual assault, he needs to assert his Fifth Amendment right then and there. And then he needs to direct the judge to say, look, she's accused me of a crime. We need to have a police report filed and we need a criminal investigation. If the investigation does not come out with me guilty, then I want her sanctioned for wasting the court's time because this is bad faith and she's using this to get control of the kids and the assets and everything else. And we should stay this proceeding until the results of the criminal investigation are complete. You say something like that, then they go, well, we can do a domestic violence restraining order. You'd be like, look, I'm still asserting my Fifth Amendment rights. See, here's the thing: the family courts will attempt to get you to waive your Fifth Amendment rights. Well, why don't you, Mr. Smith? Why don't you just explain to us what happened? Okay, Fifth Amendment right. Next question. Okay,
Yeah,
well,
that's your
what about
job.
this?
That's not my job.
Exactly. Go play hide and go fuck yourself. And how about we go with that? Because the reality is that people forget this. This is the age of Me Too. It's like when everybody started calling everybody a Nazi. Now the meaning of Nazi has gone away. Feminists want to redefine words. Guess what? The legal system in every jurisdiction in the country, and in fact, every Western civilized society has a legal definition of sexual assault. They have a legal definition of rape. And the reality is these are crimes. And we have 3 organizations that handle these types of things. And we've had them prior to feminism. It's called law enforcement, prosecutors' offices, and criminal court justices. And anytime this comes up in a family court setting in any context, the appropriate response is we need to have a stay of proceedings until the professionals get done with their investigation. And they'll go, well, what about a parenting investigator? Or what about a CPS? No, law enforcement. The police have a sexual assault division of trained officers who know how to deal with this. They know what to do. If Jane's accusation is real and it is credible, they will ferret out the evidence. I will be prosecuted and go from there. I'm not afraid of that, but I don't want to be witch hunted for a crime in civil court and be denied my rights of due process. I'm not going to be, and that's the point. You don't get denied your civil rights. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, do you, I understand, do you see in this sort of Me Too era, from what I can see, Me Too is sort of this transitioning from this campus tribunals about sexual assault being foisted into really the popular consciousness, but also into our legal systems right now with, like I said before, there's no statutes of limitations on rape. There's no statutes of limitations on sexual harassment. All the stuff that Brett Kavanaugh had to go through, all of that was an issue because we presume that he's guilty already. So would there be, I understand the idea of filing a criminal suit, but is there some sort of way that even just the suspicion of that can sort of hang that guy in the court because the jury or the judge or whoever is still gynocentric? They're still believing in the blue pill side of things.
It happens all the time. They actually consider false allegations the silver bullet of child custody cases. That happens all the time, and it's very, very consistent. Again, the thing about the statute of limitations is, are we going to beat the statute of limitations fight? Probably not. But the advantage of the Me Too movement for men is that it actually can now demonstrate that feminists really they want to accuse every man of sexual assault. I think it's imperial overreach. Feminism, gynocentrism, control society. This is imperial overreach. However, just because your statute of limitations goes away doesn't mean you can automatically manufacture evidence. This idea of listen and believe, that idea is dead. Even in Canada and other gynocentric countries, people cannot get these people convicted just on listen and believe alone, because once the evidence is presented, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this whole witch hunt was bad. And frankly, once that guy gets exonerated, like you said, he sues everybody into the Stone Ages and makes a huge amount of money in the trade. It's just that in the short term, you're going to take hits. And that's what they're expecting. They're expecting that when they hashtag Me Too you and falsely accuse you of this and falsely accuse you of that, they're hoping to break you immediately. Once they break your spirit immediately, then they can do whatever they want.
All right, I got one last question that I got to ask. MRAs, A Voice for Men, good, bad, where do they get right and what do they get wrong?
I think A Voice for Men, what they got wrong was they didn't vet the people who spoke for them. There are people that were writing for The Voice for Men that probably should never have been there, and they gave A Voice for Men a really bad name. I forget the guy's name who runs it. I've seen some of his videos.
Paul Elam.
Yeah, Paul Elam. I like Paul Elam's stuff. He says a lot of important things. I don't necessarily agree with his delivery style per se, but that's just my own personal opinion. But I think that when it comes to the content he provides, the information is very, very good. But I think the sad part about the whole idea of A Voice for Men is that the Red Pill movie, even though they called it like, A Voice for Men, the movie, the sad part about the Red Pill,
Nothing to do with it. Yeah,
exactly. The sad part about the Red Pill movie was it wasn't let's discuss men's issues. It was let me tell you about how I experienced men's issues from a gynocentric perspective. So when it comes to that kind of thing, A Voice for Men, unfortunately, even though they are a voice online, most people in the younger generations don't give them any heed anymore because of all the problems that they've had.
Yeah, Roll Up they made a documentary that was a feminist journey through the men's issues.
Yeah, it's a cute little feminist who decided she wanted to make a story about her journey of self-discovery. And
I giving a shit, nobody gives a shit.
Yeah, I explained that back when Mike Cernovich and Milo Yiannopoulos were coming out with saying, "Oh, let's get $10,000 so she can distribute this," and she made a big deal out of it. And she's still riding it here 3 years later. I think one of the things that I think that MRAs get wrong is they try to be more perfected feminists. They believe the lie that men and women are equal. They believe in this egalitarian ideal, and I think that's what really fucks them over. Is they believe in this equalism that they were sold on being possible, because that's really the cover story of feminism, is that we're doing this all so we have a more equal society. But as we can see, that's all bullshit. But they seem to think that it is something that is realizable or something that is actually maybe even desirable. And so, I mean, I've heard on several occasions, Paul Elam and Dean Esme saying stuff like, well, we don't believe in that Evo Psych stuff because we need to be in a more equal situation right now. And it's basically the same lie that feminists are floating out there with regard to equalism and egalitarianism, but they can do it better because they're men and they figured it out. And I think you're right as well. Is like they get the wrong people to be their spokespeople. They've always embraced quote unquote anti-feminist feminists into their ranks. That's why Elam has a problem with Christina Hoff Sommers right now, because she wasn't pro male enough for him. And I've told the dude, as much as I possibly could back in the day, said, you guys are getting into bed with the wrong people.
DDJ, I have a question. It's real basic, but I just want to ask it. How familiar are you with the Red Pill community distinct from MGTOW and men's rights and pickup artistry?
A bit. I mean, I pay attention to it, if that makes sense.
Okay. I just wanted, it kind of hit me. I wasn't sure if you were aware of it as a distinct group. It's recently
I think
on subreddit.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to, I've seen the Red Pill Reddit. I think the thing is, what a lot of people don't understand is that there's a lot more people out there that subscribe to MGTOW philosophy than even themselves sometimes realize. Because really, the litmus test of MGTOW is avoiding marriage, avoiding meretricious relationship, stop, period, nothing else. A lot of other people, you will see that there will be MGTOW content creators and MGTOW voices within the community that state other things, but those things are not the base MGTOW philosophy. There are MGTOW monks, there are MGTOW PUAs, there are MGTOW incels, within that MGTOW community. And most MGTOW don't even agree with one another on a variety of issues, with the exception of those two particular things.
What's the base MGTOW philosophy?
Just avoiding marriage, avoiding meretricious relationships. That's it. It's pretty simple.
Damn. This has been such a fantastic fucking show. This is easily top 10 of our 41 episodes.
Yeah. I want to get DDJ back on with Rich on here at some point so we can talk about divorce, because Rich is all about we've done episodes on divorce before, but I would love to have DDJ in on something like that.
100% co-sign. I'd love to have you back on, DDJ. We do this.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. Thank you.
We have a little more time here, but we do need to wrap up pretty soon. We've had a lot of comments too. We've had a huge viewership today. We have 732 viewers right now. Everyone hit the like button before we wrap up today. Appreciate all the questions too. I've been getting a whole bunch in, but we've been focusing on discussion instead. Damn. Anybody have any last questions for DDJ before we kind of wrap up?
I do want to circle back to this one, that getting from that I just want it to go away to fuck this, I'll burn it all down and they can sort out the ashes. I guess you've had clients. I mean, I've had clients I've never seen other than me, and I just got cold, and that's gift from the gods. But what have you seen that actually makes a guy take that mental switch?
Apparently the universe doesn't like you. Anyway, you were saying?
Yeah, that mental switch from like, I need to help the mother of my children and I just want this to go away, to get from that learned helplessness to the point where they get shocked and just say, fuck it. And I'm just wondering, like, what have you seen that got a guy to that point?
Honestly, it's if you can sit a guy down, especially a guy who's been raised by a single mother, and ask him how she treated her father, or how she treated her ex-husband, the father, or your father, or the kid's father, and how she treats the men in her life, that's a very huge indicator for, I mean, that's a red pill moment for many men. I mean, a lot of the younger generation that I speak to, and I'm almost 50, but a lot of the younger generation that I speak to, they're children of divorce, and they don't want to they don't want to get married because they watched how their parents treated one another. They saw that failed. They don't want to be a part of it. The other side of it is
guilty as charged.
Exactly, because again, your parents teach you based on what they see you do. You learn from your parents on what you see them do, not what they say. So that example is there. So when women take advantage of men and people see it, that's an issue. Now, the gut response for a lot of blue-pilled men is, you just chose the wrong woman. And my motto is this: every woman is promiscuous if you catch her on the right day.
Also guilty as charged.
We're going to get along real well.
So, but and it's no disrespect to these women. It's just that promiscuity culture has been promoted to such a level. So how do you red pill these men? Really, they have to be ready for it. But I think the other piece of it is that a lot of men have this sacrificial duty attitude. And what ends up happening is that when they wake up, if they don't have a support group around them, they commit suicide or they make the news because they've killed their ex, when the reality is that, no disrespect to anybody else here, but MGTOW would have saved their lives. And you see these people where you go, look, this red pill knowledge, even if you're not MGTOW, this red pill knowledge would have saved their lives if they understood the nature of these relationships and the current societal level of indoctrination that occurs. So one of them, again, the younger guys, it's all about, watching what their family does, watching what the women around them do. And then for the older guys, typically it's usually they get what's called go MGTOW the hard way, where they've been divorced, raped, and that, or they know somebody who has. And then of course there are these guys out there who are confirmed bachelors. They don't have children. They've never been married. They just knew. They just knew from the get-go. And they're like, hey, look at me. I avoided all that bullshit. And then they usually get around it pretty well. I hope that answers your question.
No, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's a tough one, so I wasn't expecting the perfect answer. So,
well, I will say this though, I do get a lot of questions from people who say, I want to red pill my friend, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. And the reality is, you can't red pill anybody until they're open to it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the whole.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I see Ryan struggling with this question a lot. On Twitter and so forth, where he's struggling with, how do you get somebody. Don't let me put words in your mouth, by the way, Ryan, but this is what I see.
Do.
That you're struggling with, like, how do you wake guys up before they get traumatized? And I struggle with that same question. And I agree
you
that
educate.
You educate, but you're absolutely right, DDJ, that if you're talking about cancer or marriage or any danger in the world, you can't convince people that they're in danger until they're ready to hear it. Because when you're the one running around saying this is dangerous, you sound like you're Chicken Little saying the sky is falling. And you try to educate, but you try to do it softly so you don't scare people away, I think.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that, like, you have to it's kind of like lightest touch policy. I get this question as well, and what I tell guys is I say that, you know, I know you want to, like, guys get really excited because they'll read my book or they'll get into the community and they'll start talking about stuff, and it'll have changed their lives or it'll save their lives in some respects, and they want to save their friends. They really want to reach out and say, dude, read this book, get into this, understand what's going on here. It'll save your life. You won't get zeroed out, or if you do get zeroed out, at least you won't get suicidal. And they want to do that. And of course, they don't realize that the resistance they're running into has been trained and conditioned into these guys since the time they were, like, 5 years old. We were just talking about the education system and how feminine primacy has sort of, assimilated all of that. They're fighting against a lifetime of conditioning. But so what I tell guys is this, is I say, look for your, wait for your opportunities. First of all, wait for, I hate to say this, but, wait till the guy is entering into something a little more traumatic, something that is sort of rattling his cage, shaking his, he's been forced into some kind of insight. And then also what I say is that when you see red pill issues in the news, when you see something like in popular media or popular culture or whatever, point those instances out, and point them out in such a way as a question, saying, hey, what do you think about this? Don't you think that it's kind of a double standard for X, Y, and Z? And looking for these things that are in your environment that are examples of red pill truths, and just sort of what I call tilling the fields, getting it ready for the time where you're going to say, okay, I'll have a read of this book and tell me what you think. Or that's one of the reasons I tell guys to pass on my book, is so they will have that discussion and they'll be talking with that guys, because guys don't necessarily like to talk. They like to do things and then they talk. So putting it into that context, I think, is important.
Yeah, and to dovetail what you've said, I agree. Any guy who's blue pill, first and foremost, it's important to remain friends with them, because what'll happen is that as the gynocentric woman in his life does take control of the relationship, she will do her best to isolate him from his social support group so that he has to rely on her. And rather than be truly interdependent, it forces him to become codependent. So if you're in a situation where you have some friends that are there, be friends with them. Go do stuff together. Don't stop socializing with that particular friend no matter what. Keep those lines of communications open, because what will happen is, if she's unhealthy for him and that relationship deteriorates, he's going to be alone, and he's going to need some kind of support network, and he's going to be able to talk to other people about it. And that gives you an opportunity to be a good friend and to be emotionally supportive, and hopefully avoid a lot of unnecessary drama.
I think we need to wrap up, gentlemen. It's been about a little over 2 hours. This has been a fantastic show. The comments have been saying that. I think all of us here on the panel agree, and I definitely feel that myself. This has been awesome having you on. I'd love to have you back on the show, like Rolla said. And also at the 21 convention next year, we have 2 of them in Poland and then America, down here in Orlando, Florida. Either as a speaker, we can discuss that, or even as an anonymous VIP guest. We can keep you kind of on the low key. We'll figure something out if you're open to it. I'd love to have you at the event. In the meantime, though, we'll just keep buying your book and selling it at the event. We'll buy a whole bunch of them. So I can even contact you about that. Maybe. Yeah, hell yeah. Well, that's that, gentlemen.
Can I toss in one closing comment here that I read a lot on the feminist side and the anti-feminist side, and there is this tone difference, and you can see it in DDJ's book, that when you read feminist literature, it is filled with hatred, and it's filled with anger and paranoia. And when you read a book like DDJ's book, The Anti-Feminist, he's like every other anti-feminist I hear. It comes from a place of love, and it comes from a place of respect for women and men, and that tone difference should tell you something very profound about the feminist movement.
Yeah. With that said, gentlemen, to wrap up, everybody watching the show, you will find links to each and every one of the videos in the video description beneath this on YouTube and anywhere else we post it. That include MissAndreadyToday.com for DDJ. I've also put a link to his book, The Feminist Lie. Everyone should pick it up on Amazon as soon as possible. It has a lot of reviews. It's a great book, and it's popular, but who knows when they could ban it, like Roosh's books, right? Or other people on Amazon. Definitely pick this up. It's a great read. And in addition to that, so the links in the book, we are tentatively launching a iTunes channel for Redman Group on November 24th, next Saturday. So stay tuned on our Twitter account, social media, and the next week's show. And we should have that ready to go on that date. In the first 2 weeks, we have the show up on iTunes and on an audio. It's critical that you guys go download it as fast as you can, the episodes, and then leave a review, 5-star review, leave, a comment about what you think about the show. that episode, anything like that. It works a lot like Amazon and other websites where you leave reviews. And the more reviews we get in the first 2 weeks, it's going to be critical. It can boost the show to get a lot of attention on iTunes. It'll get promoted among their other categories and networks and things like that. So that's November 24th. It'll be a big thing for Redman Group. And I know you guys have been asking for that in the comments for weeks. We are on it, and it should be November 24th, iTunes podcast audio launch. And we'll put the links out on Twitter, social media, and on the channel as well in the videos. With that said, I want to thank my fellow guests today here on the show, Dr. Sean T. Smith, author of The Tactical Guide to Women, Rollo Tomasi, author of the Rational Male book series, Ryan Stone, the fourth R of the Manosphere at ryanstone.com, and DDJ, author of The Feminist Lie, also known as Bob Lewis, pen name. Gentlemen, I'm going to wrap up the show and end the broadcast. Everyone watching, thanks for watching the show. Please visit us at patreon.com/Redman Group to support the show, as well as reddit.com/r/Redman Group to join the subreddit community that Ryan Stone got started for us. And also hit the like button, leave a comment, do all that stuff. Greatly appreciated. Cool. And we are off air.